everyone, and welcome back to my wine diary. On this channel, I do wine reviews, educational and fun facts about wines, and everything in between. So if you're into wine as much as I am, please consider subscribing. This video is a little bit spontaneous for me, and that's because up until a little while ago, I have never even heard of Vinho Verde. For me, Portugal always associated with port, and of course I tried some of the other red wines from there, but I have never heard of Vinho Verde. Apparently, when you sit down at a typical Portuguese restaurant in Portugal, you're being asked, what would you like to drink? Now, if you tell your waitress or waiter wine, the next question coming back at you is verde or maduro, which means green or matured. So what does that actually mean? Let's dig into it. Now, after doing my research, I'm now convinced that Vinho Verde is incredibly misunderstood. First of all, its name. Now, verde, of course, means green, but the wine itself, and I'll show you some samples in a second, is not green in color. Neither is the process of maturation, because those green grapes are not harvested up until fully ripened. Now, that said, the name Vinho Verde actually comes from very juicy and full vegetation of the area where it's produced, called Minho in Portugal, and has nothing to do with the actual wine color. Now that we've gotten this out of the way, let's uncover some other mysteries about Vinho Verde. I have to tell you that the color of Vinho Verde was the first thing that immediately shocked me. I asked the store associates to show me where the wine was, and it was under the Portugal section, of course, just lying there on the shelves. So the variety was not super large. I think I had about 7 producers to choose from, so I grabbed 2 bottles. The very first bottle that was recommended to me is the one that I'm going to try in front of you right now. But take a look at this. Now, was I expecting green wine? No, because I've already done my research, but I expected at least a little bit tint of yellow or greenish color, maybe like Pinot Grigio or something like that. But at this point, I'm looking at the bottle that is completely clear in color. The second one that I have has a little tint of yellow to it. This one is basically clear. I'm going to show it to you a little bit closer, and hopefully you can see it is completely see-through. I have been drinking wine for many years, and I have never in my life seen a wine that's clear in color. So that was a first shocker to me. Now, this particular one is by Nobilis, and it says Vinho Verde on it, as you can see, if you can read anything, because the bottle is clear and the label is clear too. But this one is said to be from the Minho region of Portugal, which is the known area where it's produced. And it states that it's 9% ABV. So let's go ahead and give this one a go before I continue the history behind Vinho Verde. So now that I have my wine in the glass, I can definitely say that it's got some yellow tint to it, but extremely, extremely faint. So looking here over the white background, I can tell that it's got a little bit of yellow undertone to it, but for the most part, it is pretty darn clear to me. I know that we discuss intensity of wines, both red and white, and here the intensity is not even pale. I mean, pale is usually the lowest range of intensity for both reds and whites, but this is like super pale, if there was such a description. And when it comes to color, with white wines, we normally start the description for paler ones as lemon. Here, I can't even tell that this is lemon, really. This is a very pale lemon on the color to me. So let's go ahead and swirl it to give it a good sniff. I did not aerate this one. I didn't give it any time to breathe. What I did do though is chilled it. A suggested temperature for serving Vinho Verde is about 55 degrees Fahrenheit, or you can think of it as putting it in the fridge for about 20-25 minutes. So that's what I did. I took it out. Let's smell it. This is an extremely fresh or refreshing, crisp white wine on the nose. I do smell a lot of floral undertones here, but they're very fresh undertones, so not like a honeysuckle, but the opposite, like very fresh smelling flowers. The citrus here is definitely coming through. I would think of anything green fruit related actually, so green apple, lemon, maybe some blossoms of honey or something, just the flower smell to it. Very, very light and crisp on the nose, on the smell. Well, if anything, the one thing that I would add here is it may smell a little bit herbaceous to me. So think about maybe mint smelling, anything that can come to mind that's really refreshing, clean, crisp, and fresh is how this wine smells. So I can already tell that this is probably a perfect drink for the beach, for instance. If you have a hot day and you just want to relax and have a refreshing glass of wine, I would go for this one for sure. But let's give it a taste before we make that assumption. Ooh. I have to tell you that this wine, for as light as it is very nice and acidic. So it definitely has medium acidity to it, in my opinion. Let me give it one more go. I can feel my mouth watering for at least 5 to 7 seconds after I drank this wine. Actually, as I'm talking, it is still salivating. So the acidity is really nice on this one for a light wine like this. Now on the palate, what I'm tasting here is more so not only green fruit and green berries, but also unripe fruit. So think about unripe grapes, although these grapes are indeed well ripened, but I feel the taste of it is best translated as unripe fruit, green fruit, citrus, maybe some limestone behind it, something like that. Very pleasantly tasting acidic wine. Another peculiar fact that I found out about Vinho Verde is that traditionally it actually came with a little fizz to it, which occurred naturally through the process of fermentation and carbon dioxide being trapped in the bottle with those grape juices fermenting. Now, what winemakers are doing nowadays is actually artificially inserting carbon dioxide in our bottles because they want public to remember the association of some bubbles in Vinho Verde. So they're injecting it with CO2 to create that illusion again. Mine here is still, it does not have any bubbles, but if you do find Vinho Verde with buzz to it or with bubbles to it, know that that's where it's coming from. Another thing that really shocked me is the average price of Vinho Verde. So an average price of a regular producer from Portugal is about or under $10 US, which is a pretty cheap price if you ask me. And then of course we have the biodynamic or single varietal versions that are a little more expensive, $18 to $20, but overall extremely affordable. So why is that? Portugal, unfortunately, went through financial crisis and difficulties much more than any other Western European country. So that is why the land labor is still pretty cheap there, and that translates into a more affordable cost of this wine. It is time for me now to try out my second wine of Vinho Verde that I've purchased from the store. Now this one here, and I'll show you the bottle in a second, it definitely has more yellow undertones to it. So not all of them come as clear as my first bottle was. So curious to dissect the color and the aromas in the palate of this one in a second, but let me show you the bottle. The price range of this one was very similar to the previous one. It was about $8.49 or $8.99. And this one is called, it's got pronunciation in the back, Caiu à Noite. So this is Portuguese and it means nightfall in Portuguese. This one claims to be 9.5 ABV content, so it's supposed to be just slightly stronger than the previous one that was at 9%. So let's give this one a go. We'll take a look at the color again with my white background here. Definitely more of the lemon color coming through on this one. On the legs, not really noticing any legs on this one whatsoever either. Expected from a lighter wine like this. And the color is pretty. I would say lemon, pale on intensity for sure again. Now with this one, I actually do see a little fizz. So this is interesting. I do have tiny, almost not noticeable bubbles in this one. Very interesting. It also has some residue floating in it, and I'm not sure what that is. It's not my glass. The glass was fresh. The color is good. This is a good color. It's got a warmer, like maybe a green apple slash honeysuckle color to it, if that makes sense. So it's not completely green. It's got a nice yellow undertone to it. All right, let's give it a good smell. Have not aerated this one either, so just going by aerating it by hand. This one smells pretty herbal to me again. So in this one, I do have that mint, maybe even eucalyptus coming through. A little bit of limestone again. And then same similar notes on the nose that the previous one had. So unripe fruit, maybe green fruit. And definitely citrus. Floral aroma is really nice on this one too. Fresh flowers, fresh blossoms, nothing heavy or sweet. Let's give it a taste. Surprisingly, this one is different. On the acidity side, this one is light acidity. It doesn't make my mouth water as much as the previous one did. When it comes to the actual palate here, I do feel like there's more residual sugar in this one, or maybe it's the fruit aromas of a sweeter fruit that I'm catching here that make it taste a little bit sweeter than the previous one. Definitely still very, very crisp. Very unripe fruit, but it also has, this one has a little bit of honey coming through. Not too much of it, but it's got a tiny bit of honey. Maybe that honeysuckle is now coming through on the palate as well. Overall, a very, very pleasant taste, but very different from the previous one. So what that makes me believe is that you really should explore your Vinho Verdes. They're not all the same, which is an incredible thing for me, because that's how wine should really be. Every wine should tell you the story behind the vineyards, behind the winemaking process, about the region where they're collected. So all of that should translate into the taste. And just imagine if all wines tasted the same, life would not be that interesting, right? So this is really fascinating that this one tastes so much different. I'll give it one last taste just to see if there's anything else coming through for me on this one. Very, very, very good taste to this one. I almost feel like I'm tasting some terroir on this one, which is rather unusual for a white wine. So maybe like a wet stone taste to it, or that limestone that's coming through on my palate. So pleasantly surprised with both. I cannot let you go without talking about Vinho Verde and food pairings. As you may already know, Portugal is famous for its seafood, so this wine will go beautifully with meaty whitefish like cod, and maybe meaty shellfish like shrimp, for instance. So anything with high acidity and light, crisp body to it, like Vinho Verde, will go great with robust sauces too. So think about maybe a nice robust paella to go with this. And this is everything for today, you guys. Thank you all so much for hanging in here with me and learning something new about Vinho Verde. Please make sure to subscribe to this channel. The subscribe button is right down below. And until next time, cheers everyone.